Part 1. A high-pitched whine on the bus roof. One peaceful autumn morning in the suburbs of Greenfield began just like any other. A light mist hovered over Maple Leaf Elementary School, where the giggles of children mixed with the hurried footsteps of parents rushing to drop off their kids. Rows of maple trees were slowly turning fiery shades of red and orange, casting a warm glow over the playground. In the crisp, early-season chill, everything felt wrapped in a delicate veil of calm. Then suddenly, a sound tore through the air, a dry, grating hiss, unfamiliar and jarring, echoing from the bus parking lot. At first, nobody paid attention. A few children paused their play and looked around, trying to find where it came from. A mother frowned, scanning the area when she heard it again, this time longer, like metal scraping across a tin roof, mixed with the whisper of wind through the leaves. Then the crowd began to realize something was very wrong. All eyes turned toward the yellow bus at the far end of the lot. Bus number 27, its engine still buzzing softly. On its roof, among the thin layer of dew left over from the night, a creature appeared as if it had stepped out of the wild forest. A bobcat stood there under the gray morning light, limbs tensed as though ready to pounce. Its short tail curled, ears erect like antennas tuned to another world. Its eyes, an unforgettable gaze, glowed bright in the dew, locking onto the crowd below, as though sizing up each person. The children went silent. Some parents let out alarmed cries. Others pulled out their phones to record, or shielded their children. The bus driver stood frozen inside the bus. Unable to move, the bobcat did not growl, and it did not leap down. It simply stood there, like a living statue, its gaze slowly following the faintest movement among the people below. It did not look injured. It did not seem lost. In fact, it had purpose. A teacher emerged from the administrative building, Ms. Emma, who had only transferred to the school a few weeks earlier. Her brown hair was neatly tied back, a wool scarf draped around her neck. She was the first person not to step back. Her eyes met the bobcat's, and a familiar spark, an icy current of memory, shot down her spine and froze her in place. The children bombarded her with questions. "Miss, is it dangerous? Why is it up there? Is it hungry?" Emma did not answer. Her mind raced with old memories of misty forest mornings, where she had grown up. And then a question surfaced in her mind, clear, like someone whispering in her ear. Where did it come from? And why is it not afraid of all these eyes? This strange scene stretched on for 20 minutes. Police had been called but remained behind the barriers. No one dared intervene. A few wildlife officers were said to be on their way, but time seemed suspended around that bus. Nobody dared approach. The bobcat remained still. Occasionally it tilted its head, its ears flickering, as if listening to something distant. Emma stepped slowly toward it, her palm open like she was soothing a child. She did not understand what compelled her forward. All she knew was that something deep, something ancient was surfacing, like a forgotten melody unexpectedly resonating in the dead of night. The crowd held its breath. The wind rose, scattering maple leaves across the playground. A bell rang from the classrooms, signaling the start of the first period. But nobody moved, because they understood that something special was happening. A rare moment when the human world and the wild intersected, and in between stood a creature that carried something larger than fear. Emma stopped under the bus. She looked up, and in that moment, the bobcat lowered its head toward her. A soft sound rang out, as if metal touched the ground. A small, round, gleaming object fell from its paws, slid across the roof, and dropped onto the dry leaves at Emma's feet. She bent down and picked it up. It was an old badge, its enamel almost completely chipped away, but the inscription remained clear: Pine Ridge Elementary School, Northern Mountains. Emma's heart clenched. Her hand trembled as she recognized the faint engraving on the back that only she knew. Because it had been her brother David's badge. He had disappeared without a trace 10 years ago in a blizzard on those very mountains. She looked up again. The bobcat still stood there, but its gaze had lost its edge, as if now waiting for her to remember, waiting for her to take the next step. Part 2. The object that carries a message. Emma stood motionless under the bus, the icy badge in her hand like a broken memory suddenly pieced back together. This badge could not be here, not in a town hundreds of miles from the northern mountains. not trapped in the grasp of a bobcat, yet she held it now, heavy, shaking, as though it carried the weight of that winter long ago. The day David disappeared had been as cold as today. A blizzard had struck without warning, cutting off all contact in the mountainous region where he was volunteering to teach. People only found his cabin collapsed, and a single muddy boot left in the snow. No body, no trace, no farewell. Emma had believed he was still alive, but that belief had dimmed over time, until now. She clutched the badge tightly and stepped back to look at the bobcat. It did not move, its gaze remained fixed on her, but something in its posture was no longer fierce. It seemed to be waiting for a signal, a recognition, a response. "How did you get this?" Emma whispered, as if the animal could hear and understand. No one heard her. The schoolyard was silent as a taut strain, but in Emma's mind, old images surge. Childhood in the mountains, where she and David had climbed ridges to gaze at the stars, learned to identify wild paw prints, and vowed never to leave nature. He had been the one to ignite her passion for the forest and animals, and he had been the first to depart. After that morning, the bobcat did not disappear as expected, even after police had ushered the students indoors and cordoned off the parking area. It still stayed on the bus roof. Every morning, before the mist lifted, people would see it, unyielding, silent as a stone, eating nothing, hunting nothing, unafraid. It was just waiting. Emma began arriving at school early every morning. Watching from a distance, she did not know what she sought. Her initial curiosity transformed into concern, but deeper inside, she felt a profound unease. The badge was unmistakable, not a coincidence, a sign, a message. Then, 3 days later, as she looked up into the dim dawn, the bobcat again tilted its head toward her, the very same way as the first time, but this time, from within its ruffled fur beneath its neck, a small leather strap fell. She ran forward as it leapt off the roof and vanished into the tree line. On the ground lay an old, worn strap, with its clasp torn as though bitten. At the end hung a wooden keychain, carved with the name David. This time, Emma did more than tremble. She began to cry. That night, Emma returned home and rummaged through her brother's old trunk. His letters, a few old photographs from their mountain days. Among them was one of him standing in front of a small school with a sign, Pine Ridge Elementary. On his chest, the same badge now in her hand. She searched for the final letter he had written, sent just weeks before he vanished. "Students here are wonderful, Em," he had written, "but sometimes I feel unbearably lonely. At night, when the wind howls, and the tree shadows stretch like arms, I miss home so badly it burns. Luckily, a bobcat lives near the school. I call it Echo. It does not fear people. Sometimes it walks with me when I go down to the village for supplies. I don't know if it understands anything, but when I talk, it looks at me as if listening. Echo. Could that bobcat still be alive? Could it be the same one?" The next morning, she called in sick. She did not explain why. She simply scrawled on the board for her students, "I may have to go find a part of myself." The bus parking lot was deserted that day. The bobcat was there again, but this time, when Emma approached, it did not flee. It turned and slowly walked toward the fence, crossing the back lot of the school. What used to be a ball field, now nothing but rough grass. She followed, heart pounding. The bobcat glanced back as if checking that she was still following. Each paw print in the frost was clear, footsteps that were anything but random. They formed a path, leading somewhere. Where to, and why, Emma could not say. She only knew that, once again, she was being drawn back into the past, a past that had never truly slept, and was now calling her, in the gaze of a wild creature, carrying memory, loss, and a message yet to be understood. Part 3. Footprints that show the way. The old trail behind Maple Leaf Elementary had gone unnoticed for years. Amid overgrown shrubs and weeds, the remnants of an old playing field were nearly swallowed by time and neglect. Yet now, a light fog on the ground traced a strange map. Bobcat footprints etched clearly into the soil, each step leading into the pale mist like an open gateway to another world. Emma followed each paw print, her hand gripping the worn leather cord with her brother's name. The bobcat never strayed far. It maintained a certain distance, just enough so she could keep track of it. Every so often it looked back, as if checking that she was still following. In the dim dawn light, this image evoked an ancient tale of animal spirits guiding humans to where they truly belong. The trail led to an old-school storage shed, once used for teaching supplies. It had long since been abandoned. The cracked wooden walls, a sagging tin roof, overrun with vines, looked as though the forest had swallowed it whole. Emma approached and gently pushed open the rusty door, which creaked and made her skin crawl. Inside was pitch dark, with only slivers of light seeping through gaps, illuminating floating dust motes like mist. Then she heard it, a soft dragging of metal on concrete, then a faint scraping in silence. Emma held her breath, pressing her back against the wall. She looked around. The Bobcat hadn't followed her inside. It stood at the threshold, as though this boundary was one it mustn't cross. But its eyes never left her. She turned on her phone's flashlight. The faint beam swept over leaning shelves, broken crates, and a battered metal box in the corner. She crept closer. The box's surface was scratched. Nearby lay a fraying red cord, its other end caught in the Bobcat's claws. Emma turned to the animal, which remained utterly still. She opened the box. Inside lay a damp, moldy, carefully folded piece of paper. She took it out and unfolded it under the light. The handwriting, unmistakable. It belonged to David. If anyone finds this, I may no longer be alive. But if you're reading this, don't be afraid. I am following the footprints of something I believe kept me alive during the storm. Emma reread it, her hand trembling so she almost couldn't hold the paper. Her rational mind screamed that it had to be a trick, a cruel coincidence or illusion. But her heart, the place that still held the image of the brother who once carried her across streams, who taught her to listen to the forest, whispered, "This is no coincidence. This is a call." She looked up. That dragging sound echoed again, this time clearer, coming from the loft above the shed. She climbed the rotten steps slowly, each step a gamble with gravity. Above was a tiny loft, dark and musty, and there she saw it, another paper, pinned to the wooden board with a rusty nail. The handwriting was more erratic, as if written in panic. Echo came back. It didn't leave. "I think it's leading me to safety. Perhaps a den. I will follow it. If I do not return, please know I have no regrets." Emma collapsed to the floor, her head in her hands. Echo. No longer any doubt. That Bobcat was Echo. But how could it have found her after all this time? How did it know she was here? Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from below, metal clattering, and then a low growl. Emma jumped up and dashed down. The Bobcat was gone. The door was wide open. On the damp ground, once again, footprints scrawled clearly, leading into the pine forest at the town's edge. Emma did not hesitate. She tucked the papers into her shirt pocket and ran after the trail. Despite the thick fog and a wind that was already rising, cold, dry, and uncanny, something was coming, a storm or a truth yet unrevealed. She did not know. All she knew was that from that moment on, there was no turning back. Part 4. The truth behind the tin roof. Rain began to fall as Emma stepped beyond the town's border. At first, just a few scattered drops. Then quickly, they became slanted streaks lashing against her face, her neck, her memories, now swinging open like an unlocked door. Ahead of her, the old trail cutting through the woods still bore the faded tracks of a vehicle. But the Bobcat's prints were clear, fresh and wet, as if Echo had passed by less than 5 minutes ago. Wind howled through the tall pine trees, a familiar sound, the sound of the final night David was still alive. Emma bent down, her hand brushing over a sharp, distinctive paw print, the curved claw mark of a bobcat, tilted slightly to the left, as if the animal was carrying something heavy inside. She continued walking, the wind and rain whipping her hair, soaking through her sweater, but she didn't stop. The fear was gone. In its place was a burning pulse running down her spine, a blind but unshakable belief. Echo was leading her where David had once gone, where he had survived and left behind fragments of a story never told. About an hour later, as the forest began to thin, Emma suddenly found herself standing before an old bus. Nestled beneath the trees, a faded green camper van, almost completely devoured by time, rust streaked across the sides, windows shattered. Inside, it was dark and damp, but across the body, the faint letters still read, Maple Leaf Outdoor Club. Her heart nearly stopped. The door was ajar, and inside, beneath the last row of seats, was a red bag, a rescue bag. Emma rushed in and pulled it from the debris. Her hands trembled as she unzipped it. Inside were old emergency items, a first aid kit, a multi-tool knife, a wool towel, a flashlight, and a thick leather journal. Half of its cover warped by rain, but the writing was still legible. David, Rescue Journal. She flipped to the first page. The opening line cut through her like a blade. Day 3. I don't know how far I've gone from the school. Echo is still ahead. It won't let me stop for long. Every time I'm close to collapsing, it turns and looks at me with eyes that won't let me give up. I think it wants me to live. Emma read, rain mingling with her tears. Each page was a confession about the struggle to survive in the mountains, the hunger, the desperation, and about Echo, the bobcat who saved him. Not once, but over and over. It led him to hidden water pools between rocks. It herded wild rabbits near his shelter. One night, during a snowstorm, it lay next to him, its body hot like a furnace. Day 9, Echo led me to a rock cave. I think it used to stay here. Safe, dry. If I don't make it, I hope someone finds this place. She turned to the final page. The words were rushed, the ink smeared. To anyone reading this, believe me, it is not just an animal. It is a guide. It is the last survivor. She looked up. Echo was there, standing right outside the bus. In the blinding white rain. No roar, no step forward, just that gaze. Deep, still, meaningful. A thunderclap shook the sky. Then another sound, urgent, a car horn, static on the radio. The principal's voice crackled through. We've lost contact with the field trip group. Last signal near the northern pine forest. Storm incoming. Launch surge immediately. Emma froze. The children, lost, out there. She looked at Echo, and she understood. The cave. Echo wasn't just leading her into the past. It was leading her into the present. Part 5. The Final Gaze. The next afternoon, when the sun finally pierced the thick clouds over Greenfield, the entire town found itself wrapped in an unusual stillness. No one dared disturb it, an atmosphere suspended between relief and miracle. The missing group of students had returned, not a single one injured. No one starved, and none cried when recounting what had happened. The only thing that left people puzzled was the presence of a large wildcat that had watched over the children all night. The kids called it the Forest Watcher. One said it stood in the rain the whole time, never entering the cave, just standing there like a shield. Another said it wasn't afraid of lightning or thunder, and it never slept. It only watched, silent and still, like a shadow. Emma said nothing when asked. She only smiled gently and said, maybe, sometimes, nature sends someone to help us, just like the times we've crossed its boundaries. But in her heart, she knew the truth. It was not just a wild animal. It was Echo, and Echo had finished what it came to do. In the following days, Emma often returned quietly to the forest behind the school, where she had once followed those dew-covered prints. She hoped to see that silhouette again, the graceful stride, the little stubby tail flicking, the deep eyes that mirrored memory. But nothing came, only wind whispering through trees, and leaves falling soundlessly, like a farewell that dared not be spoken. Once, while walking across the empty lot behind the old storage shed, she came across a very faint footprint, just one, right in the moist soil. The distinctive curved claw, slightly angled, just like the very first time. Emma bent down. She didn't pick anything up. She didn't take a photo. She simply closed her eyes and smiled, a silent kind of gratitude. That Friday morning, during the flag ceremony, a third grader stood to read his essay, My Hero. Instead of mentioning firefighters, superheroes, or football stars, he talked about a bobcat that had protected him during a storm. His voice rang out. It wasn't afraid of anything. It stood there like a mountain. I think it knew he needed it. The schoolyard fell still. The homeroom teacher was about to adjust the microphone when Emma gently signaled to let it be. The boy ended with a sentence that took everyone by surprise. When I grow up, I want to be like it. Nobody has to know my name. I just want to help when it matters. Emma looked up, her eyes shimmering. That sentence, like an echo from David's journal years ago. A circle had quietly closed, complete and whole. That night, in her study, Emma opened her brother's journal one final time. She took a pen and wrote beneath David's faded last entry, "I met it, David, and I understand now. It wasn't random, it wasn't unclear, it knew exactly what it was doing. It brought you to safety. And now, it brought the children back to us." She returned the journal to the drawer, beside the Pine Ridge school badge, now cleaned and framed in glass. Like a keepsake, like a testimony to something only she could ever truly verify. Before bed, she cracked open the window. The night breeze slipped in, carrying the scent of young pine and damp earth. And in that brief moment, she thought she saw it, far off, across the street, on the roof of that old school bus where everything began. A soft shadow, eyes glowing like tiny stars. Echo. She didn't call out, she didn't wave, she just watched. And then, like mist lifting at sunrise, the image vanished, but the gaze, that final gaze, remained, in her heart, in her memory, and in the quiet places humans have yet to name. Part 6. The Transspecies Connection. There was no formal goodbye, no last look held eye to eye, no call, no response. Echo left the way it had arrived, silently, with intent, like a part of the mountains, the wind, the mist, belonging to no structure that humans could define. But its presence, a bobcat in a schoolyard, in a storm, among shattered memories and lost children, was living proof of one simple truth between humanity and nature. There exist threads of connection that science cannot label, and language cannot fully capture. It does not need to be understood, it only needs to be believed. Emma no longer tried to explain. She stopped reading wildlife migration reports or searching for a biological answer to Echo's behavior. Instead, she practiced quiet observation, just like David once did, listening to the woods, learning to read the signals nature sends in its own gentle, hidden way. She understood. Echo wasn't only the creature that once saved her brother, or guided the children through the forest. It was a symbol of intuition that had not been lost, of trust without conditions, of a connection that surpassed species. In an age when humans grow ever more distant from nature, seeing animals as statistics and forests as resources, there was a creature that came back, not to demand, but to remind that we were once a part of nature, not its master, that some things can only be saved through empathy, that salvation sometimes arrives from places least expected, from beings we thought we could never understand. Years later, the story of the bobcat on the bus roof became a local legend. Some said it was a spirit of the ancient forest. Others said it was the descendant of a creature that survived the blizzard all those years ago. Emma never argued with any of the versions, because no matter how the story was told, the essential truth remained clear. There is a connection, one that, if your heart listens, you will recognize. In the memories of those children, Echo lives on, a quiet guardian. To Emma, it was the final embodiment of belief, belief that carried her beyond fear, across time, and back to the hand of a brother long lost. And for those who choose to believe, Echo stands as proof of something profound, that between humans and nature, there exists a language still unnamed, but always present, in a gaze, in a footprint, and in the encounters we never expected to find, but never forget.